I really don't know what to say. And if I did, who am I anyways? I haven't written anything. How in the world can I possibly critique someone else's work? Let's talk about that this episode of Horrible Writing.
That will never work. You can't push us. Seriously? Don't. Oh my God, that's really that's bad. You probably should find other hobbies. You ever learn how to spell? Stop. Be happy. Well, you don't bother. I've seen better people. Do you really want to? And my third grade, get up.
Welcome to Horrible Writing, the rawest, most candid, in-your-face writing show on the interwebs because none of us have time to suck. Let's do this. Hey everyone, Paul Sading. I hope this finds you well. Episode 89 of Horrible Writing. But more importantly, the episode that kicks us off into June of 2019. A year ago, this month, I was finally, in a couple days, releasing my first ever novel. Bucket List Achieved. Awesome sauce. Since then, I've published an anthology, 12 Deaths of Christmas, if you're into horror, gruesome horror, and Novel Idea to Podcast, a nonfiction book for writers about how to use podcasting to sell more books. So within the past year, I've published 3 times. I've got 2 books currently very, very, very close to being ready to be published as I work on a nonfiction book and another anthology. I've done a lot in the past year, but I still don't know anything. And I'll always be learning about writing. But one thing I do know, one thing you know, whether you know or not, is you know a good story when you hear it, see it, whatever. Yet, the pretentiousness of writers, writing groups, the writing community, and that doesn't mean everybody. It's just that sliver who are pretentious, because we are creators. We are writers. Those folks aside, they have a huge impact on us in our own development. One of the most important things we need to know how to do, to learn how to do, is to provide constructive feedback to other writers on their stories. Now, the reasons we don't are as extensive as the people who, extensive and varied as the people who listen to this show, and those who don't know it exists, and shame on them. Everybody should know that it exists. We will never be able to really drill down to a focused conversation without doing a lot of dedicated episodes on this topic, and I don't know if I'm necessarily that excited to do that. One thing, there's a couple constants in my life when it comes to creative work, in terms of my feedback to other people. Those things are that I don't have a problem doing it. I quite enjoy it, in fact. I'm told that people are extremely appreciative of my feedback because it's unlike anybody else's. Though I don't mean that in the most extreme connotations, as if I have cornered the market on the most unique feedback ever. It's just the way I say it, the things I pick up on, etc. And beyond that is the fact that I see things that other people don't see. That neither here nor there, strength nor weakness, it is what it is. But I share it with you because this was brought on by a recent conversation over in the Horrible Writing Writer Support Group. So if you don't get on Facebook for any other reasons than to check with your writing networks. Make sure that you add us to your writing network. Come join us. If you're a writer, come join us of any form. Poetry, memoir, novel, novelists, audio dramatists. You, the writer, even if you don't feel like you deserve to be in the group, you do. And we want you to come along. But recently, one of our members, Ashley Franklin, so Ashley, thank you, was talking about editing their own stuff and how much more comfortable Ashley is doing that as opposed to making suggestions on another's work. And she qualified it essentially in a nutshell that, hey, until I do a lot more of this, I don't feel that I'm ready to critique someone else's work. And it was encouraging, as I expected from the Horrible Writing Group. It was encouraging that everybody jumped in and tried to help her move away from that mindset. And that's exactly what I would hope to see in that group and in all writing groups, to be honest. But this notion that we somehow have to be legitimized before we're allowed to be able to critique someone's work. And I don't mean externally, though it could also mean that. More in context of what Ashley shared in that conversation. Internal allowance. When I read the post, I interpreted it as Ashley not giving herself that internal allowance to say, hey, I'm legitimate enough to provide critique, feedback to other people on their writing. You are. Regardless of how long or how short you've been writing for, you have that allowance to provide another writer a critique on their work. You read. At least I hope you do. As a writer, you read. And yes, that means those of you who listen to audiobooks are readers, because audiobooker is just way too hard of a phrase to work into a sentence each and every time you need to reference readers. You're a reader. You also consume story in other ways, orally, via movies, podcasts, whatever. You're a fan of storytellers. You have to be if you have a passion for writing and interest in writing. You have to be a fan of storytellers, regardless of what that looks like. Through exposing yourself to these storytellers, probably, I would imagine, hazard a guess that it's a wide spectrum. Some people are good. Some people are real good. Some people are excellent. Some people are superior. Master storytellers. As you've listened, one of the reasons why Stephen King says you need to read more than you write is as you're consuming, absorbing that story in whatever medium it comes to you in, you're picking up subliminally, you're picking up on structural elements that make it appealing to you. You are not the judge, jury, and executioner of all that is good. And that's a good thing. Who would want that responsibility? Who would want to be the person who determines what is good and what isn't? I wouldn't want that. And therein lies the power and the beauty of your legitimacy. You know the stories that appeal to you. Think about why they do, but that's a whole nother discussion to have. The fact is that you know what works. Even if you don't know why it works, you know what does. And you aren't that judge, jury, and executioner, so you have the freedom to be entitled to your opinion. And that's what critiques are. When you're helping, that's what we're doing. We're not critiquing, I mean, we are critiquing another writer, but we're not critiquing another writer. We're helping them. We aren't the agent who says, if you don't do this thing, I'm not going to represent you. We are not the publishing house that says, if you don't change this chapter, we're not buying the book. All you are is a peer, regardless of whether you're 20 or 70, you're a peer, and You're providing a perspective. It's your perspective. And as I've talked about a number of times on this show, the writer has a responsibility to get as many perspectives as they can, as many relevant perspectives as they can on their stories. It doesn't mean, and nor should you believe, that you have to write 100 short stories, publish 3 novels, whatever, before you're allowed to have that perspective. When you go to a writer's group, when you read somebody's stuff in a swap online, as you're going through that story, if it's a live reading, as they are reading that story, you know where their tripping points are. You know what works for you. Now, one of the things I believe that allows me the empowerment and the freedom to be myself in critiquing is my local writing group. It's a great collection of great writers, and we have an allowance. I've been part of other groups that aren't like that. They're very structured in what you provide for feedback. So if you are the organizer of a group like that, stop. You're killing the artistic expression in the feedback. Let people give the feedback that they need to give. And if you want to hold true to your box, enjoy the empty box. I would never be part of a group like that. Instead, it needs to be like our group out here in Olympia. This group is awesome. Whatever you pick up on, that's what you critique. And that's the beautiful thing. There's somebody else who is in the Horrible Writing group. Her name is Ellen. And we were in a recent writing together. And I made a couple observations on someone else's story. And Ellen kind of humorously slapped her pen down on her paper, her version of the story, or her copy of the story that the woman was reading. And she said, "Isn't it neat how we all pick up on different things?" Yes, it is. And what's doubly neat in our group is we don't spend any time with grammar and spelling and all that junk. That can always be fixed. What we really need to be spending that time on is story structure, story elements, right? And that's what we do. Again, another reason why I absolutely love that group. But it's in this context where the group is set up where I can be myself and provide those things. So, 1, you are legitimate. 2, because you know what a good story is, even if you don't know why, that will come with work, with study, with dedication, with practice, right? Those things will come. But you're already legitimate in providing other people your thoughts on their work. So let's get that to the side. Next big thing is finding those groups that give you that allowance. That sometimes you may need to make that or ask that question. What do you want for feedback? And some writers don't even know that. And that's okay. Give them what works for you, what jumps out at you. Help them on that learning curve. Bring them along more quickly, even if you're more advanced. You're not going to give them an 8-hour seminar on plotting. All you're doing is at your level to what you interpret their level to be, giving them what you see in a story. Finding those groups that allow that to happen. And then the last tactic that I would offer to you is to use an old supervisory trick, an old counseling trick that I learned many moons ago as a supervisor. Compliment sandwich. Do you know what the compliment sandwich is? I'm sure you do, and I'm sure you've heard it used on you, or you've used it on someone else. When you need to provide some feedback for people, you have a candid point of criticism that you need to communicate to them. In order to soften them up and prepare them without, going into in-depth on how to counsel people, you want them to not feel threatened. So you compliment them. It's a casual, fun, safe conversation. Then after that compliment, if you will, is when the criticism comes in. This was really good voice. The pacing was strong. It didn't feel like it was a 10-page chapter at all. But here on page 4, there was inconsistencies in your antagonist's voice. He sounds highly educated in this paragraph here, but look what he does here. And I don't know if you're doing that deliberately. That's cool, and hopefully we'll see that inconsistency be consistent throughout the novel. But if that's not a deliberate tactic, I wanted to point that out to you, that the antagonist's voice doesn't sound consistent to me. But hey, it's a really colorful character, and I really dislike them, and I'm excited to see what you do with the rest of the book. Now, what I just did there for you was give you an impromptu compliment sandwich. You set them up with a friendly thing that I kind of skipped over, but I explained it earlier. And then you jump into the critique, where it's, now that they're safe and they know you're not going to personally attack them, you draw their attention to something that, in your opinion, needs work. And then you'll all notice probably what I did at the end. After I gave them this criticism, constructive criticism, I wrapped it up with another compliment about how much I disliked their antagonist in a good way, right? Consistent with a story. You want the antagonist to serve the role of antagonist. And that I was excited to see what they were going to do with the rest of the story. So, compliment sandwich. Piece of bread is a compliment. The meat in the middle is a criticism. And that other bottom piece of bread is another compliment. You bring them in safe. You give them something they can work with. You don't just give them garbage. And then you take them out with another compliment. Work that into your critiques from now on. Anytime that you go to a critique group or you swap critiques online, try that. Give them if you do it online, give them some compliments at the top of the first page. Go through where you're pointing out things, your criticisms, and then end it with a nice little footnote at the bottom about what you enjoyed about it. It's not another time. Sure, it may need a lot of work. That's not the time to tell them that. Let them absorb the criticisms that you gave them. Make sure they're constructive, and then wrap it up with that compliment at the end. I think if everybody finds themselves practicing this in all of the feedback that they give, it'll be much more productive of a feedback session. You'll feel better. And again, if you keep those things in mind while practicing it, that you are legitimate, that you do know a good story when you see it, that it's just your opinion. You're not judge, jury, and arbiter of all that is good, bad, ugly, and indifferent. You're not. That gives you so much freedom. It takes the albatross off of your neck so that you can just do the best servitude toward that other writer that you can. I hope you all find that helpful. We're coming up on episode 100 in 11 weeks. It's almost 3 months from now. Why am I saying it? Numerically, that's why. Just because I realize next episode will be episode 90. Some of you have stuck the entire way through. You're absolutely awesome. I can't wait to celebrate it. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm going to bring on some folks to have them share where they are now. And if you've been on the show before, you got an email a few months ago from me what I was looking for. So make sure you go look for that. Reach out to me again if you want to make sure that you're part of that. Otherwise, I'm just going to talk and talk and talk. And we all don't need that necessarily. Come over onto Facebook and join us at the Horrible Writing Writer Support Group. It's a network. It's a supportive network where we can find other writers like ourselves of all ranges of experience and expertise, all the way down to the complete neophyte. Join us. It's friendly. If that's the only thing you go to Facebook for, good. Go to that and nothing else. That's cool too. It'll always show up on your feed and your Facebook, so it's perfect. If you want to help out with the show, leave a rating and review where you listen to your podcast or over on, obviously, Apple Podcasts, because that's where everybody goes to aggregate these kind of things. Those things help immensely. If you're a fantasy fan, if you want to help a little bit each month with this show, then become a patron. $1 a month gets you all kinds of exclusives. More dollars a month give you more exclusives. But you can do that over on patreon.com/Paul Sading. All one word. Follow me on Twitter at Paul Sading. Instagram, same thing. I'm going to get back to working on the stories we tell because we've got another episode coming out. If you have not stopped to listen to that show, definitely come check that out. It's all the storytellers in the Horrible Writing Writer Support Group coming together and writing their own flash fiction pieces, many of which we feature on that show. It's really cool. All genres, all voices, awesome show. Until episode 90, keep being epic.
This has been Horrible Writing, and hopefully after this episode, you suck less than you did at the beginning. I am Paul Sading, your host extraordinaire. You can find me over on the Twitterverse at Writing Horrible and over at paulsading.com/horrible-writing. Until next time, suck less.